Hey there, and welcome back to the Difference Maker Revolution podcast. And this week we are continuing with our series on the megatrends that are affecting the photographic industry. So as a quick recap, last week, Brad and Ronan talked us through, what strategic planning is and the importance of it. We talked about the risk of stagnation. So what are the dangers of not evolving? And we shared some stories about, real life giants who stagnated, they failed to evolve, and now they're dead. And we then talked about the tools that were used, so 5 key business tools that were used for this strategic analysis. And we introduced you to megatrend number 1, which was the evolution of photographic equipment. And Brad and Ronan shared how, it's important to note that everyone has a good camera in their pocket. Today, AI can enhance images, and that the implication for photographers is that the art and science of photography alone, they're no longer sufficient differentiators in the market. And we had begun to dive into megatrend number 2. So megatrend number 2, the self-centric photography industry. And I asked Brad a question, and I asked Brad again the question. So, Brad, a lot of photographers I speak to, they talk about their style, their work, their value. And I think there's a belief that, their clients are coming to them to buy their style, their work, their value. And I asked you the question. So, Brad, why do you've had thousands of clients in your business? Those clients, do they come for your dad's style and his amazing photography? Just share with the audience again. So when a client books and buys, and they buy wall art, they buy folio boxes, they buy albums, they buy digitals, they buy prints. Some of them spend multiple thousands with you on an experience. Some come back again multiple times. Talk to me. Why are they doing that? Is it for, and your dad's an amazing photographer, but is it for Stan's unique style? What's happening?
I don't think any clients ever come in for my father's unique style, which is quite funny. Surely one must have done in the 40 odd years has been in business. Maybe one has, but no. Like the only people who value photography are photographers. Clients don't see it like that, and for me. Well, I'll answer your question. That I'll give you something that I've mentioned before, but really answered it in my own brain many years ago. Is that clients come in for something deeper, or something more meaningful. It might not even be that deep. They just love their family, and the value proposition for them beforehand is they want some photographs. But then, from communicating with them and delivering them the experience, they can they actually then have a product that makes them feel wonderful. And it's that what they purchase. How we present it, whether that's in frames, wall art, folio boxes, albums, however we do that doesn't really matter. That's just like the end. Not even the product, it's just how the product's delivered. The actual product is how we make people feel. And I really started to discover that years ago when I started to understand digital marketing more, and understand that all marketing solves a problem, or anything we buy solves a problem. And then that led me down a thought process of, well, what problem do we solve as a business? And I quickly deduced that it wasn't photographically. It was a more meaningful, we were giving confidence to women, we were giving hope, we were giving love. And they were the problems we solved. And I knew, I think all photographers know this, that the general public do not know what a good photograph is. That they cannot appreciate what a good photograph is. And for me, that really demonstrated, because years ago, Facebook probably still has this option, but years ago, you could list 10 Facebook pages of other photographers in your local area. You could do more, and you could track them. And I used to go once a week onto this platform, and I used to have a look, and I used to have a look at how many comments they were getting, how many likes the page was growing by. And if there was any page there that was growing more than my business, I would freak out, and it would stir me into action, because I wanted to have the biggest page on Facebook, because at the time I saw value in that, because years ago people would judge a page by how many likes it had. Now nobody cares. But by doing that, I spent a load of time on all my local competitors' Facebook pages and looking at their photographic work, and it's abysmal. And I'm sure every photographer knows the guy down the street that sells everything for like $10 or $50. And you can look at their work. I can always remember looking at some of their reviews, and they all had wonderful reviews. And someone had uploaded like 10 photographs from the session that they just had, and wrote, fantastic photographer, the best photographer I've ever been to, wonderful person. Just look at how fantastic these portraits are. They were all out of focus. Like you could see lighting stands and background stands in the backdrop of them. They were the worst photographs. But from a photographic standpoint, we wouldn't even sell them in our studio because we wouldn't think they were like fit for purpose. And that made me realize then that the consumer really does not have a clue on what a good photograph is or not. They care about who's in the photograph. So then that really made me double down on my own marketing message for how to stand out in that space.
And I've heard stories where clients have literally spent thousands on, a photograph, like I said, that was out of focus, and the photographer was like mind blown because they're like, I can't believe they bought that one. And it's not because it's the style or the photographer's work, it's because they're buying what is important to them, and that photograph means something to them as a family. It symbolizes something. Oh, I'm sticking my thumb up by accident. And because of that reason, that emotional attachment that they have attached to that particular photograph, that's the reason they're buying, because it's important to them. But Ronan, like the common mindset we see all the time for Megatrend number 2, the self-centric photography industry, is my client does not value me or my art.
Yeah, and we see this in the forums all the time, Jonathan. We see it. Oh, that client, they came in, they didn't value me, or they didn't value my art, or they didn't, and every other photographer then is saying, yeah, you're right, they don't value us, and they don't understand how long we've trained to do this, and they don't understand that we've all these awards and the amount of time it took us to become this great in managing light and creating the perfect photograph, and they just don't value us. And you know what? You're right. They don't, and they never will. And if you try and build your business based on that, there's only one place you will end up, and that is that you won't have a successful business. And Jonathan, there's a great thing that I sort of align this to, because often you hear from photographers, yeah, but they still don't value me, and I'm a luxury brand, and the question I ask anybody who's into luxury brands, and I know I've some friends who love Chanel, right? And they'll buy a Chanel bag, or they'll buy a luxury brand bag. And when you ask the question, like, who did you buy that bag for? They say, for me, of course. And I say, oh, so you didn't buy it for Chanel? No, I bought it for me. So why did you buy it for you? Well, I bought it for me because it's a luxury brand. It's a bag. It brings me status as being successful, because when people see me with a Chanel bag, they go, oh, that person must be successful. And that makes me feel good that other people see me with this bag and therefore say that I'm successful, and that makes me feel good about myself. And it's a way of rewarding me for all of my hard work because I am successful. And, that it just makes me feel good about what I've done, and that I can buy this bag. They don't buy it for Chanel. Do you see Chanel all over social media going, it's somebody in the shop today and they came in and they looked at all the bags and they bought nothing? Surely, what's going on? Like, surely they want a Chanel bag because it's Chanel. No, they don't buy it for Chanel to increase Chanel's sales or increase Chanel's profits or allow them have a job or allow them pay their bills. They do it because of what it means to them.
So what's the solution to tackle this mega trend of our self-centric photography industry?
Well, I think that we talked about trends a little bit earlier, and we say that, trends evolve over time. And I believe that the megatrends, and we haven't talked about them all yet, right? But if you see the megatrends, they're not individual things, right? They're individual trends that are colliding together, right? And when we get in and we talk about all 5 megatrends and how they are all colliding, you will come to the conclusion, I hope, that we have, that where the photography industry is right now, if it continues on that, it risks going like Kodak. As a collective, it risks going out of business. If you put all the photographers together and imagine us as one big company like Kodak, these mega trends are saying to me, if we continue thinking it's all about photography, and we explained in the last podcast as to how we believe that came about, right, that we're in real trouble as an industry.
So really, we just got to start listening to our clients, having conversations with our clients, understanding what's important to them, and then allowing them to buy what's important to them. So mega trend number 3, dual worlds. Ronan, just explain that to us, and then we'll have a little conversation about this mega trend. What does this mean, dual worlds?
So you guys, you Facebook expert guys, right? When did Facebook first come out?
2008.
2008. That's what I thought. So around the same time as the iPhone, right? Not too dissimilar that way. And the mega trend, if you think about this, how long are humans in existence?
More years than ever before.
Okay. So if you think of social media, and if you think of how long it's around, since 2008, right? It might seem to us living in this moment that it's been here forever, right? But it's really only been around for a very tiny millisecond in human existence. Yeah. But what has happened, and we have all seen this, is that now people, even though it's so new, are living in 2 worlds. They're living in the real world, which we've had in all human time, but they now also have a digital world that they live in. And often they have a digital identity. So the principle of a dual world that's really, really new is this idea that people are living in 2 places at once. Yeah. And you see it when you go into a restaurant, Jonathan. I'm sure you've seen this, where you go into a restaurant, right? And I was in a restaurant recently, and these 5 ladies walked in, right? And they were probably in their 30s. They all had a phone. They sat down at their table. They took out their phone, and all 5 were on their phone. And then within 5 or 6 minutes, the waitress approached the table. They all got their menu. They put down their phone. They looked at the menu. They ordered from their menu. They gave the menus back to the waitress. They all picked up their phone again. And then their food arrived, right? They all put away their phone. They all started eating their food. And that's when they started to converse with each other, right? So we do know about this new digital world that we don't fully understand the effect it has on us as people, even though there's a lot of studies now that are suggesting certain things. What we do know is that we have this desire to get those likes and comments and shares and comments on what we post on social media, right? And often our real world relationships are suffering because of our attention on that. Because if you go back before social media and those 5 friends went out, there was no distraction from each other for that precious time they had together. They were actually having breakfast at the time. And it was probably before they had to go to something else, right? So they'd limited time. And yet at least a third of the time, they were together, but they weren't together. They were all on their phones.
So Brad, how does what you offer in your business help combat the challenge of the dual worlds?
I don't think it. I don't think it does combat it. I think it just offers a an alternative, because as humans we crave social interaction, and we particularly like in-person interaction, even though it tends to not be the case, but we crave it and we need it. And I think it depends how far you extrapolate, AI into the future and where we see ourselves living in the next 10, 20 years, because the world we live in 10 years' time could be exponentially more different than it is today. But the big thing through all AI is that it can't touch you. It can't give you love. And they're the industries, or rather the only industries, or the industries that I view that are going to do the best in the future, are all the industries that focus on the human side of things, that focus on giving love, affection, like real world experiences that actually bring people together, and wherein that's what my business does. We're not a photographic business. We take photographs, sure, but we solve human problems. And I think our business will thrive because we'll be in desperate need. It's quite, like boudoir photography works really, really great because there's just such a demand for it, because of how women are viewed in society right now. And there's a tremendous amount of external pressure, and all that external pressure essentially makes it so that boudoir photography is a solution that can help quite a lot of women solve problems that they have. I only see that like exponentially growing through mass advancement of AI, and not just in the boudoir world, just in anything. I think we're going to seriously lack that human interaction, the human touch, and just reality.
So you've progressed us on to megatrend number 4, which is the impact of AI on photography. So we know that AI is rapidly advancing. We know that it's making it easier to create images or photographs. And, if you make it just about the photograph, we know that, there's already ads out there saying fire your photographer and talking about making your headshots. And if we, as AI develops and becomes better and better, we're going to have to look at our business differently and think about what business we're actually in, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, AI will be at a point relatively soon where it'll be vastly superior to humans in terms of their photographic capability. It won't take long for AI to surpass us in that realm. So if you're basing it on, your photographic style or artistic flair or artistic vision, the AI will beat you because it's smarter than us and has access to so much data and is able of comprehending things so remarkably fast that it'll overtake you if you compete in photographically. So then the only way to compete against it is not to compete on the photographic level, is to compete on the level that AI can never compete on, which is that human level, because that's the only thing that it can or won't do until we get into the realm of until Tesla releases Optimus robot and suddenly you can turn that into a woman, and then you can have an AI robot girlfriend, and when that happens we'll be ruined. But we got a few years before that. That's longer than AI will take our photography.
And the AI revolution that's happening now, John, it reminds me going back to the Dual Worlds piece. I remember doing a tour of the UK at the time, trying to say to photographers that, there's a change that started now, and that people are living in two worlds, and you have to find a solution as to how you can commercially sell digital files along with what you do in print. Some photographers resisted that a lot, and a lot of them went out of business. Not all of them, but a lot of them went out of business. There's always exceptions to every rule, right? But the reason why I said that at the time was that I could see this dual world and this desire by consumers to have two identities, and they would want photographic representations of their aspirational selves for social media. Now, here's a key thing, Jonathan, that I'm going to link to this AI trend that's happening at the same time, right? Is many photographers, and if I go back to 2011, I actually promoted this idea. I actually promoted the idea that what you sell in print, you sell a digital file with it. Okay? That's no longer a sustainable business model. And here's why. That has actually evolved into a situation today that I see a lot of photographers do. And especially if you take photography like high school senior, right? The high school senior wants a whole load of different looks, right? And they want the digital files. Why? For their social media, right? That's what they want, their aspirational self. And I see a whole load of photographers, and I'm going to exaggerate a little bit now, but they get the crowbar out to mum and dad, and they say, when you buy these images in the album, you get the social media file for your daughter, for her social media, or your son for his social media. Yeah. That's how it's sort of evolved. And often only for those digital files, as the high school senior doesn't want to have one at all. They're not interested in a boutique photographic experience as a high school senior. What they actually want, right, is to look good on social media. Now, if you think about, like, AI is not even out in nappies yet. Like, we talked a little bit earlier about the rollout of the trend of social media, and it goes back to 2008, right? AI is not even it's probably barely out of the womb, never mind out of nappies, right? And you can see how fast it's evolving, as Brad has said, right? And you see what it can do already. And we can see the ads already by companies saying, fire your photographer with our photo AI, or whatever they call it, right? That's there already. So what do you think that high school senior in the next couple of years, it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be years, right, will say? They'll say, take one photo of myself, mum and dad, I'm going to upload it to this AI. It's going to create all the images of me that I want for my social media. They're already pitching this to influencers, saying, you no longer have to go to a destination to have photos of yourself as an influencer being there. We can do that for you. So think about that, and think about, how you're going to deal with that. And Brad has just talked about it a few moments ago. And boudoir photographers we see, often by chance, get great sales because they make a difference to the client without even realizing they're making that difference to the client, right? But that's going to come into all of our photographic experience, not just boudoir, into everything we do. It has to be about the client. It has to be about a transformation experience for them. It's got to be about how that work makes them feel. So that's the fourth mega trend now, Jonathan, that we've talked to.
Yes. And megatrend number 5 is consumer availability of products. So the availability of photographic products to consumers. What's that about?
Yeah, I'd love to bring Brad in on this because he'll know the timeline on this better than I do. But Brad, do you remember back to a time, like you're a third generation studio, where the products you had that the consumer couldn't see or buy anywhere except from a photographer?
Yeah, it was all of them.
Yeah, it was all of them. And like, if you think about the internet, I think it was 1996 that Amazon launched, right? But today you can buy nearly anything on the internet, right? You can buy anything on the internet. So in the past, where you could only get a professional album that looked like a professional album from a photographer, or you could only get a certain framed print from a photographer, or you could only get a folio box from a photographer, right? Now anybody can buy a product that, if it's based on a product that's very similar, to the degree that the consumer might know the difference. And I know there's companies out there, like 3XM, we don't sell to consumers, and there's other companies who say we don't sell to consumers, right? But my point is that if you take an album, right, I can get pretty much any album that a photographer buys even from those companies that the consumer can find in consumer land. They mightn't be by the same manufacturer, but to a degree, we talked earlier about how a photographer noticed the quality of a photograph, but the consumer doesn't know the difference, right? The same applies to a lot of products. So we see a lot of photographers, and we're not saying the product's not important. It is. It's a vital part of the experience. But relying solely on the product to deliver your value, where again, we may have got away with that in the past, that's gone now too.
So, 5 megatrends. We think that there are 3 possible strategic choices to help us to overcome these megatrends and pivot to make sure that we not only survive but thrive in the future. So the first possible choice is, first strategy number 1 is to be the lifetime photographer. What does that mean?
Okay, so we're not talking that there's only 3 choices. These are 3 choices that I see in the market, right? So I've talked a lot to photographers about this. I've talked a lot about these mega trends to people I know really, really well, who've been in the photography industry for a long time and are established. And when I have these conversations, they say, do you know what, Ronan, what you're talking about makes a lot of sense to me. You're absolutely probably right. There's a really good chance what you guys are talking about will happen. But here's where I am in my business. I have built a business over many, many decades. I'm really well known in my locality. I have a client base where I become the lifetime photographer for that family. So they come to me. They came to me when the children were younger, and then they come for high school senior. They've updated their family portraits on a regular basis, and they graduated as high school seniors, and they came to me for all of that, and they continue to do that, right? So what they've said to me is that I'm expecting to retire in the very near future, right? And that might be 2 years, it might be 5 years, it might be 7 years. And I believe that I have enough in terms of my brand awareness within my locality, the people who know me, the clients who consistently book me, that I can get to retirement and have the financial wealth I need to retire before I need to change. But my question is, a lot of photographers see those photographers, right, and think that they have the time to do that too. And they may be only starting out in business later as a second career, or they may be just starting out in the photography business, as a 25, 35, 40-year-old person, and haven't built that loyal customer base yet, and won't get away with being the photographer's photographer to get to where they need to before these mega trends and these changes are going to seriously damage your prospects.
What do you think, Brad?
On what point in particular, Jonathan?
Just on this idea of that the lifetime photographer, that they're nearing retirement. Do you think they'll survive to the point of retirement?
Maybe is the best answer. There's too much nuance involved, and there's too much individual circumstance involved to be able to give a really, really great answer on that. But I think that, if you're intending to make photography your sole income for the future for a protracted period of time, 5, 10, 15 years plus, then ultimately if you don't pivot your business and you continue to operate as a photographer, I don't think that plan's going to particularly work well for you. You might get away with 2 years. Might. But probably not. If I was a betting man, I would say not.
And I'm really glad you brought that up, Brad, because I think it's a key thing to consider. We're not saying that this is a choice that you should make. We're saying this is choices people are making. And we talk about the choices that we recommend. So, and we don't know, as we said, we're predicting the future here. We don't know how long it's going to take. But, as Brad said, it could happen next year. We don't know. It really depends. And circumstances are going to be different too, based upon the percentage of your business that is from existing clients who keep coming back and have committed to do so. There's a whole load of variables and nuances, as Brad said, that will influence that. But we can't talk to all of them here, and that's why we've chosen to talk to 3 of them.
So the second possible strategy or possible choice, and I think I realize now why I hate this word, but the second strategy is creating a luxury brand. And it goes back, we had a conversation earlier about what that actually means and why people buy Chanel, as an example. And I think why I dislike it so much is because photographers don't actually understand. A lot of them don't understand what it means to have a luxury brand. They think what we talked about earlier, that it's about them and that people are buying their work, their style, their brand. And earlier when we talked about why people actually buy a luxury brand, we discovered that they're not buying they're not buying Chanel for Chanel. They're buying Chanel for themselves. So Ronan, just recap. Give us a recap there about this strategy for creating a luxury brand.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Jonathan. I did a lot of research on luxury brand creation over the decades, and I updated that research recently just to see has any of it changed, and guess what, it hasn't. So to create a luxury brand, Seth Godin, I'm sure you guys know, if you don't follow Seth Godin, you need to follow Seth Godin, right? He's one of the number one thought leaders in our industry, as far as not in our industry, in the world. He's not in the photography industry, in the world.
In marketing.
Not just in marketing, in life and psychology, in marketing. He's an absolute leader in all of those things, because marketing is psychology, right? Or a lot of it is. So if we think about what Seth says about a luxury brand, right? So I'm going to read it to you. If you pursue a luxury brand strategy, you better bring your client status. You better bring your client status. So even luxury brands like we talked about Chanel, no, it's not about them. It's about the status they bring their client, right? So in the same way, for me in photography, if we look at status in that way, so often people will drive a Ferrari to show people, oh, he or she must be successful at driving a Ferrari, right? So it brings me status of being successful. Who was it, Brad? Was it that we read years ago? Was it Bugatti or somebody who their advertising was that an oil change on our car cost $50,000? Do you remember that one? Was it Bugatti?
Yeah, I think it is Bugatti.
But the reason why they had that was people went, oh my gosh, an oil change on that car costs $50,000. So that when somebody sees somebody driving a Bugatti, they go, oh my gosh, that person must be really successful because an oil change costs 50 grand on that car. It's bringing them to status. It's not that they're driving a Bugatti. It means, what does it mean and what status does it bring them? And there's some interesting things about a luxury brand building, right? And I talked to a photographer who I regard as being a proper luxury brand, right? And we were talking about this, and she said to me, Ronan, it's taken us 30 years to get to where we are. It's taken us 30 years where we've reached a stage where we have clients who come into us. She said, I had one last week and the client came in and the client said, they're in a particular friend group, right? And they all are going to this photographer. And she said to this photographer, can I have a different portrait than any of my friends? So I can say I have, I'm not going to mention the business, but your photography and no one else has that. That's the sign of a luxury brand that has status. Yeah. That they want to be able to boast that they have this portrait of their family, right? And that it's perceived as being better or different to that of the friend group who also use this photographer. Yeah. So the other thing if we get down to the numbers, when you research this, to build a luxury brand takes somewhere between 5 and 10 years. That's the minimum time it takes. And a lot of photographers I see who've built luxury brands and actually do have a status symbol with some of their work, often, they did a part-time for years and a really big high-paying job and did it on the side till they reached the stage, right? So they had the money to get them there. right? To have the time to do it. And here's the other thing. Luxury brands spend somewhere between 20 and 30% of revenue building and maintaining their brand, right? So if you are going to be a luxury brand as a photographer, you better budget between 20 and 30% of your revenue on brand building, right? And I read a great story at the weekend of Rolex, who we know are brand masters, right? And they tend to partner with sports events and other events to build their brand, right? And Formula One racing, which is that fast car racing thing that I know very little about, but has a big following across the world, right? Rolex are the watch sponsor or the time sponsor for Formula One, right? Tag Heuer, the other German, I think they're German or Swiss watchmaker, are currently, right, bidding against Rolex for that contract. And they've put $150 million on the table to be Formula One's time sponsor, right? Now, if you think about that, and you might say, yeah, but Ronan, we're not Rolex, so we're not big brands like that. Yeah, but it's all relative, right? If you want to be a luxury brand in your community, right, you also are going to spend big money on building the reputation of being a luxury brand, and allow somewhere between 20 and 30% of revenue.
Sounds like an expensive and long time risky strategy. But anyway, the third possible choice is becoming a difference maker photographer. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a difference maker photographer? What's the difference?
Okay, do you want me to go? I thought Brad was going to jump in there. Brad, do you want to go first? Or will I tell you what, Brad, right? You can answer this question, but I'm going to quote Seth again. Is that okay?
Yeah,
so I should quote Seth once more. So the good news, right, as we talk through this, again, that great master Seth, who's told us about what a luxury brand does. He says here, the good news is that more than ever, value accrues to those who show up, those who make a difference, and those that do work that matters.
Yeah, so I suppose being a difference maker photographer is everything we spoke about in this podcast and the previous podcast is actually where the value truly lies. So if you're a difference maker photographer, you understand that your clients don't value photography. They don't want a photographic product. That they actually want something more and something meaningful. And it's delivering on that. It's building a business that's centered around human interaction, human care, and delivering experiences, delivering transformational experiences. And that's what it's centered all about, because if it's a pivot from the traditional viewpoint of photography being a science, being luxury, being prestigious, and to pivot away from that and actually put it into the client, because the clients are the hero at the end of the day. They're the people who ultimately spend money with us that enables us to live our lives. And if they didn't do that, we'd all be starving artists. And I think that if you make the choice to be a photographer rather than being a difference maker, you will be the starving artist. There's no two ways around that. If you reject what's happening, it's just like Kodak. You'll disappear. But if you move forward into the human element and to actually understand what it is your clients truly value and truly want, that then you'll be in business a long time.
And I think it's important to remember that, when you do it right, your clients will spend on themselves, and they'll spend the same or more as what they would with a luxury brand photographer. Like, being a difference maker photographer does not mean you're going to have lower sales. You'll actually probably have higher sales because you're creating something that is important to your client. And like we discussed, clients don't spend money on brands. Clients spend money on themselves and their family and their loved ones, and the value that they attach to that, and the meaning that they attach to that.
Yeah. So I think where we are with this podcast is we're near an end of this podcast. And we did say this was going to be a 3-part series. So what we're suggesting is the third part will come at some time in the future. But what we want you guys to do is we want you to send your questions to us, to comment on anything you've heard over the last 2 podcasts, and we'll address those questions at some time in the future. And before we go, and before Jonathan tells you about your next step on the difference maker, becoming a difference maker photographer, I just want to leave you with just 2 short thoughts. And the first one is that when you become a difference maker photographer, there's an abundance of opportunity based on people's real world that aren't just linked to life events. Because often the lifetime photographer focuses just on lifetime events. So there has to be a lifetime event for them to come to you. And the second thing I want to leave you with is AI can't hug your clients. That's your job.
So the quickest, fastest, best, simplest way for you to become a difference maker photographer is to be inside the inner circle. Why aren't you in there already? You should be. So to join the inner circle, where you will learn the actual practical skills and strategies to become a difference maker photographer, to learn how to attract clients and create quality bookings, to learn how to increase your average sale, to learn how to get clients coming back multiple times, to build a business that matters and create a business that actually makes a difference. The best place for you is inside the Difference Maker Inner Circle. To join, just click the link below, book a super short call with one of the mentor team where we'll just have a no strings attached, no pressure chat about you and your business. We'll see where you are. And if we feel like this is a path for you, we will invite you to join the inner circle. There's absolutely no pressure, no strings attached, like I said, but book a call, have a chat, and we'll discuss the possibilities for you and your business by becoming a difference maker photographer. From me, goodbye. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.